The Old Chateau is one of the most iconic locations in the entire Pokémon series, and it recently got another chance in the spotlight in Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The Old Chateau is a very mysterious and creepy place, and over the years, a lot of people have tried to explain what exactly is going on with this place. Well, since I have gotten the chance recently to revisit Sinnoh myself in Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I have actually come up with a theory about the Old Chateau that I think could potentially explain its origins, including who originally owned it and why it ended up becoming abandoned and haunted. So that is what we're going to be exploring today, which is all being made possible in the first place by the wonderful sponsor of today's video, Boxu. If you've got someone on your Christmas list who likes anything Japanese, or you just want to get a gift for yourself, then you should definitely check out Boxu. They send Japanese candy and snacks right to your door every month that comes straight from Japan, and not only are they delicious, which I can vouch for since I get the boxes myself, but Boxu is also running a giveaway right now to send one lucky winner to Japan for free. If you sign up for a subscription by December 31st, you'll be automatically entered to win 2 free tickets to Japan. So not only will you be getting or gifting some delicious treats this holiday season, but you also will potentially gift someone you know a free trip to Japan and be able to go along with them. How cool would that be? You can even get 10% off a subscription by using my link and code in the description, so be sure to check that out to get some awesome treats this Christmas, and be automatically entered to win free tickets to Japan at the same time. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity either for you or as a gift, and a big thank you to Boxu for supporting the channel. So when it comes to the Old Chateau, there are a few things that most people usually wonder about when this place comes up in discussion. Namely, who originally owned the Old Chateau and lived there, why was it abandoned, and how did it become haunted? Well, as I said, I have an idea of what the answers to these questions could potentially be, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys and then show you the evidence that supports my case. After playing through Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I believe that the Old Chateau was originally owned by Mr. Backlot, and it was abandoned by him because it became haunted by Rotom. Now, if you need a refresher on who Mr. Backlot is, he's basically a super rich guy who lives in the Sinnoh region, and you can find him in his mansion on Route 212. Not only does he own this particular mansion, but he also owns Amity Square in Hearthome City. And the thing that really struck me about this, that put this idea in my head in the first place while I was playing through the Sinnoh remakes, is the fact that this particular Pokemon mansion that Mr. Backlot is currently living in on Route 212 is identical in appearance to the Old Chateau. The only difference between the two is that the Old Chateau is obviously in disrepair, so its roof is a little worn and a little bit of a lighter color, but other than that, they're identical. They even have the same decor to a certain extent as well, because one of the fancy ornate statues that can be found at the Pokemon Mansion also resides within the Old Chateau. So Mr. Backlot being the original owner of the Old Chateau makes a lot of sense from a visual perspective, but it also makes a lot of sense with his background too, because he's really the only person that we know of in the Sinnoh games who would actually be rich enough to be able to live there. In fact, we actually get to see a portrait of the owner of the Old Chateau in an episode of Pokémon Generations that centers around the location. As Cheryl and her Chansey are exploring the abandoned mansion, they come across a giant portrait of who can only be assumed to be the original owner. And if we compare this to the appearance of Mr. Backlot in the games, while it's not identical, we also know that Mr. Backlot uses a generic NPC sprite, so of course it's not going to be one-to-one. However, even with this in consideration, there are still some distinct similarities, such as the fancy, posh mustache. And with this being in the anime realm, which can obviously have its own creative differences to the games, it is not out of the question at all that these two characters could be one and the same, especially because we do get to see what Mr. Backlot looks like distinctly in the main Pokemon anime series, and this depiction of him actually does look similar to that portrait of the presumed owner of the Old Chateau that we see in Pokemon Generations. Once again, there are some differences, but there are distinct similarities, and because these come from two different series and therefore two different canons, you would expect some creative and visual differences to be apparent. So the simple fact that they look similar in appearance, even though they're not identical, is enough, at least in my opinion, for this to be consistent with this theory. So, if I do say so myself, we have got a pretty solid case so far that Mr. Backlot was indeed the original owner of the Old Chateau. We've got the fact that his Pokemon mansion is identical both on the exterior and nearly on the interior to the appearance of the Old Chateau. We've got the fact that they've got similar decorations to one another with those ornate Pokemon statues, and we pretty much know that he would be the only guy in Sinnoh rich enough to be able to afford a big mansion in the forest like the Old Chateau is. And of course, we also just established that there is a visual similarity between Mr. Backlot and a portrait of the presumed owner of the Old Chateau that we see in Pokemon Generations. However, I also have even more evidence to share here as well. So if we assume that Mr. Backlot is indeed the original owner of the Old Chateau, and that he abandoned it because he found out it was haunted, he probably would have had to have been pretty spooked in order to abandon an entire mansion. And the person that did abandon it would certainly have had to have been very rich in order to even be able to afford to do so, which once again points in Mr. Backlot's direction. And there is a really good potential example of Mr. Backlot's possible fear in his current Pokemon mansion, because it is heavily guarded. The entire property is surrounded by a giant fence in Pokemon Platinum, and in the original Diamond and Pearl and the remakes, it's surrounded by just a straight up brick wall. He's also got guards patrolling the entire premises as well, which definitely is consistent with the idea that after his experience in the Old Chateau, that he's taken extra security measures in his new house to ensure that no intruders or ghostly spirits will ever enter his home undetected again. And to add on to this idea even further that Mr. Backlot was seriously spooked by his experience in the Old Chateau, his current Pokemon mansion is in a completely opposite location to the Old Chateau. It's not only on the opposite side of Mount Coronet, showing that Mr. Backlot put a literal mountain between himself and his now haunted former mansion, but it's also on the opposite side of Sinnoh as well, where the Old Chateau resides in the northern part of the region, and his current Pokemon mansion on Route 212 resides in the southern portion. So Mr. Backlot owned this place, and after his spooky experience, moved himself as far away as he possibly could and put as much protection around him as he possibly could as well. I think we've got a lot of evidence in support of all of this, but there's one more thing that we still need to address. Well, technically there's two things, the first of which being Rotom. We obviously mentioned at the beginning of the video that it was hypothetically Rotom who initially haunted the Old Chateau. So how could Rotom have spooked Mr. Backlot so bad that he moved as far away from the Old Chateau as he could possibly get? Well, it possibly has to do with the second point I have yet to bring up, and that is the ghosts of the Old Chateau. While you're exploring around this abandoned mansion, you will see ghosts of both an old butler as well as a young girl, and they definitely have to play into this somehow as well, because they're probably haunting this mansion because they died in this mansion, and if they died in this mansion, presumably while Mr. Backlot lived there, then that would obviously be involved in his experience in some way. Well, this is certainly on the more hypothetical side of things, but given that we know that Rotom is a mischievous, playful Pokemon, and it also has the ability to inhabit and control electronic devices, it's possible that due to Rotom's mischievous nature, it was wanting to use its powers to play some pranks on the people of the Old Chateau, and in doing so, accidentally killed the butler and the little girl. If you're suspecting that your house is being haunted by a ghost and then 2 people inside of your house die, that would definitely be spooky enough to want to move as far away as possible, so it gives Mr. Backlot a good motive there. But is there any evidence of this actually happening? Well, in addition to it being consistent with Rotom's general mischievousness, there is actually a little bit of circumstantial evidence that falls in line with this idea. In Rotom's room, where you find all of the machines that can change it into its various forms in Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Pokemon Platinum, you can find an old notebook that tells a story of a young boy that basically became friends with Rotom at some point in time. It's unknown who this young boy is or where exactly this story is taking place, but at one point in the story, this young boy writes that while he was playing with Rotom one day, it accidentally shocked him and caused him to become unconscious. So if it's been documented that Rotom is able to make people become unconscious just by accidentally shocking them, even someone who Rotom considers to be its friend, then I certainly think it's possible that a similar accident could have occurred in the Old Chateau that resulted in the deaths of the butler and the little girl that we see still haunting the mansion. It's also possible that Rotom ended up in the Old Chateau after the events of this story, because as I mentioned, it doesn't really mention where this story takes place. All it mentions is that after this occurrence of this boy becoming unconscious at the hands of Rotom, Rotom felt really bad and basically fled. The boy eventually did end up finding Rotom inhabiting his toy robot that he mentions earlier in the story, but from here, the story kind of just ends. It doesn't mention that the boy and Rotom really reunite in any permanent kind of way, so it's possible that after the events of this story is when Rotom made his way to the Old Chateau and eventually started inhabiting all the electronic devices, which there would be a lot of in a mansion of a rich guy like Mr. Backlot, which would naturally attract a Pokemon like Rotom who likes to inhabit such devices, making this general idea even more likely, and then from there, the events of this theory would have panned out. So that is my theory about the possible true origins of the Old Chateau. What do you guys think about this theory though? Be sure to let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have any other ideas, be sure to let me know as well. Also, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it because it really helps, and subscribe if you're new for more Pokemon content all the time. I will be back with another video very soon, so until then, as always, thanks so much for watching, I love you guys very much, and I will smell you guys later.